Remember this scene from Shawshank Redemption? Andy Dufresne escapes from the prison going through a sewer pipe. He comes out here. Then he takes his clothes off and lets the rain cleanse him from all that sewer gunk. All this is packed with symbolism. The filth, the pipe, the storm, the clothes, and the rain. His leaving the pipe is obviously a rebirth. The clothes coming off represents the shedding of his old identity as an inmate. The rain is a literal rinsing him off, but it's also a symbolic cleansing, like baptism. Lest you think I go too far, the word redemption is in the title of the movie. What is symbolism? What is allegory? And how do we recognize these things and figure out what they mean? This is what we are going to cover in this video. So we've talked about imagery and metaphor in previous videos. For our purposes today, I'd like to offer a shorthand explanation of imagery, metaphor, and symbol, in the way that Lawrence Perrine does in my very old copy of Sound and Sense. Imagery is what it is. Like the white fluffy dog yapped incessantly. It's a dog. With metaphor, when I say, "That dirty dog just stole my cell phone," I'm calling the thief something that it literally isn't, what it is not. And lastly, we have a symbolic dog. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. We're talking about literal old dogs. But we are not just talking about literal old dogs. We're talking about more than dogs. We're talking about old guys like me, who can't do Snapchat, maybe for reasons other than the fact that it's stupid, what it is, and more. Okay, so if you want a more fancy-sounding definition of symbol, here it is. Symbolism refers to the use of an object or an action that represents something beyond itself. Some symbols keep coming up in books and movies, and everyone knows them, or at least they should anyway. These are called universal or traditional symbols. Sleep is often symbolic of death. Colors can be symbolic, like white is often a symbol of purity, and green is a symbol of life. Butterflies are symbolic of transformation, and swans are symbols of grace. The violet, the flower, that's a symbol for transience, and an apple for temptation. And fog is a symbol for uncertainty. And the list goes on and on. Authors will often use traditional symbols, but they also like to make up their own. These symbols have meaning only in the context of the specific novel or poem or movie in which we find them. The White Whale in Moby Dick by Herman Melville is a symbol of the elusive, vengeful force of nature. The White Rabbit in Lewis Carroll's Alice's Adventures in Wonderland is a symbol of curiosity, fantasy, and escape. In Harry Potter, the golden snitch is a symbol, as is the Mockingjay pin in the Hunger Games. They mean something more than themselves. Some symbols are more complicated than others. So a wedding ring is a fairly simple symbol. It's a symbol of constant faithfulness and abiding love. Some symbols symbolize more than one thing. They can be more complex. A rose, for instance, is a symbol for romantic love, but also passion, beauty, and woman. Add the thorns, and it means the risk of getting hurt that is inherent in making yourself vulnerable to another person when you fall in love with them. And symbols can get even more complex than that. The One Ring in The Lord of the Rings? It symbolizes corruption and power, temptation, obsession, malevolence, the loss of identity, and the tenacity of evil, the burden of responsibility, and a test of character. And that's probably not a complete list. So symbols can be simple like a wedding ring, which isn't that simple, but it's not nearly as complex as the One Ring. Symbols are often objects, but they can also be actions or events. We've already talked about the breaking free rebirth scene from Shawshank Redemption. How about the three-finger salute in the Hunger Games? It becomes a symbol of defiance and solidarity against the oppressive capital. Planting Seeds in the Secret Garden by Francis Burnett, this action symbolizes growth, healing, and transformation. And then there's name symbolism. Truman Burbank is the main character in the movie Truman Show. Truman, the true man, represents humanity. He's the modern Adam who is not banished from Eden, but chooses to leave paradise to live free from Christoph, the showrunner of The Truman Show. Did you notice that name? Christoph? Another symbolic name. Winston Smith, the main character in George Orwell's 1984. This book was published right after World War II. The name Winston would certainly bring to the minds of the readers Winston Churchill, who was an exceptional character who led his country as it defied the Nazis. Winston Smith's last name, Smith, is the most common name in England. So Winston is a symbol of exceptionality and defiance, and he's also everyman. So how do you figure out if an object or an action or a name is a symbol or not? This can be tricky because not everything is symbolic. The necessary skills for finding symbols comes with practice, of course. But here are a few guidelines that can help you when you're looking for symbols in the poems, stories, novels, and movies you're reading and watching. Does it have more significance than its literal presence would suggest? There are a lot of objects and actions in poems and stories. Some of them fill out the setting, or they help to describe a character, or they set the mood or tone. So they're going to be important, but are they important to the central purpose of the story or poem? If it is important, it'll probably turn up more than once. Or it might turn up at an important time in the story. Another way you might be able to tell if it's a symbol is if the author draws particular attention to it, with compelling diction or a little more imagery or figurative language. And last, a symbolic interpretation of an object or event will make sense with the rest of the story or poem, and it will help to achieve the central purpose. Not all of these things are required for an object or an action or event to be a symbol. And if it has one or some of these, that still doesn't mean it's going to be a symbol, but these things can begin to help you ask the right questions. Let's talk about allegory. Allegory is related to symbol in that you've got an actual thing that represents something beyond it. In the case of an allegory, the literal thing is like a whole story, and the thing beyond it is like another whole story. C.S. Lewis's The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is an allegory. The story is about 4 children who go to a magical world that has a huge lion named Aslan in it. The lion is good. The White Witch is evil, and she tempts one of the children, Edmund, to eat Turkish delight and do other bad things. Edmund must die as punishment, but Aslan insists that he takes Edmund's place. So the White Witch kills the lion on the great stone table, and he comes alive again later. The elements of this story point to the Christian story of redemption found in the Bible. So that's an allegory. In my next video, we will discuss some poetry, focusing on symbol and allegory.